Okay, so we're going to talk about hunter-gatherer societies. And this is going to supplement what we've been doing in class with that activity in the civilization game. This is just a little information for you to have that will help you make your decisions in the future and give you the reasons behind your decisions from yesterday and from today. So basically, what is a hunter-gatherer? A hunter-gatherer, as we talked about in class, is a person who survives by hunting small animals, such as deer or rabbits, and gathering plants, like the mushrooms. So they live by developing tools and fire. So they develop what's called technology, and we all know what technology is. But those are tools and skills that people developed to meet their needs and wants. So the first tools were simple. They were made of stone, and they were used to cut, carve, skin animals that they were going to eat. Over time, they became sharper, and they became more useful, and they became the tips of spears. So we had a lot of development on the tools. The second thing they developed was fire. So it gave them light, as we talked about in our wolf example today. It kept away predators. Used it to cook meals, and they could survive in a range of climates, which is actually going to be important later. And it's going to allow them to migrate. So, migration is where people leave their homeland to live somewhere else. I had you guys do that in class. That was one of the scenarios that I gave you. If you chose to migrate, you gained yourself an elder. Congratulations on doing that. And there were basically two theories, and we talked about these in the previous set of notes. So the first theory is they originated in Africa and then migrated to new places. And they replaced the people who originally lived there, so they kept coming and going and coming and going. And the second theory is they developed separately, and they basically mixed together to create kind of the common culture we have today. So, if you look in your book, there's a map. It shows arrows of people moving from place to place. And so as they migrated, they had to adapt to their new environments. And to adapt means to change your way of life to suit that new environment. So they had to answer a lot of questions after they migrated, like what plants can be eaten, like the mushrooms, which animals are the best to hunt, the deer or the rabbit, and they had to find new materials for their shelters. They had to leave those behind as they moved. One of the biggest reasons that they had to adapt was the climate. And as we talked about in class, there was an ice age, so they had to find a way to keep warm, so fire became very important, and they had to find new, warmer materials for shelters and for their clothing. They also started to form larger communities. Larger groups could kill larger animals, like woolly mammoths and larger deer, and defend their communities from attack by other nomadic groups. They began to form clans as well. So a clan is groups or families with a common ancestor. So as families survived, they became clans, and as the civilizations grew, they had one or two common ancestors. And the benefits of these clans were they could trade with each other. They had a creation of networks, so one clan could like another clan, and they could trade for things that are a lot more valuable, such as sheepskin and goatskin and deerskin. And they basically could provide themselves information on survival during hard times. So if there was a time where food was scarce, they could find food. If there was a new way to feed their clan that another clan knew about, they could share that with them, and then their clan would survive and become stronger. And then we have the beginning of the Neolithic era, which is basically a revolution, which is a complete change in ways of thinking. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of these this year. A whole bunch of different revolutions. So, as the Neolithic era begins, the glaciers begin to melt, and the land begins to shrink. So, a lot of the time you can't migrate as far because now it's water instead of ice. Some plants as fir trees spread north. Some plant species died out. So they had to find new ways to eat, and the animals also started to die out. So hunters had to find new animals to hunt and new animals to eat after they hunted them. So what the early hunter-gatherers did was they modified their environment. So a couple of clans used fire to burn their trees away. Well, the brush that was left behind in the bushes that grew in the place of the trees brought deer so they could hunt. People also noticed that seeds, if they spread them on the ground, grew plants. This is huge. And they also began to domesticate, which is to change the growth of plants or behavior of animals in ways that are useful for humans. So what this means is they started to plant the seeds and grow plants themselves, and they began to start herding animals. This was good because it became a nutritious and reliable source of food, and after a while, that food became better quality. So if you think about it, we'll take a tomato. Tomatoes, when they were grown in the wild, were about the size of a cherry. If you think about tomatoes that are grown now that you'll find in the supermarket, they're a lot larger. They're about the size of an apple or an orange. And so this leads to the spread of farming. And basically, what research says is Southwestern Asia is the center of agriculture. And farming had both benefits and costs. So the benefits were you could grow more food with less land. Usually you need about 6 or 7 acres of land. You could have more permanent shelters because now you can grow your own food. And you can get new material for clothing because you can grow cotton or you can grow anything you can use to create clothes. Farming also had costs. It took more energy and time to do because now you have to plant and tend to the crop. It was uncertain if there's a bad weather season or the seeds were not good, your family could starve. And it could have been dangerous. Sometimes we could have animals in our garden, in the farming, or you can have other nomadic groups that came and attacked the other clans. So farming had benefits and costs. But what this actually led to is called surpluses and specialization. As crops and herd improved, the amount of food that farmers could produce increased. So these created surpluses, which are extra crops or cattle that is not needed. And you could use these to feed lots more people. And basically what happens is they start to specialize. So specialization is when people spend most of their time working at a single job. So right now, you could say you specialize in being a student. I could say I specialize in being a teacher, if that makes any sense. So back then you had farmers, you had hunters, you had tool makers, you had weavers who made the clothes and the baskets. You had the gatherers who went out to gather the plants and the mushrooms to eat, and things like that. And that is it.